Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the next in our series of Space Power to War Fighter Seminar Series, brought to you by the Mitchell Institute and the Air Force Association. And on behalf of my boss, the Dean of the Mitchell Institute, General Deptula, I want to thank you for being here, particularly our sponsors, our general officer guests that are here today, our embassy guests, as well as particularly want to say hello to Cecil Haney, Admiral Haney, who was former head of Strat Command. I want to thank you for being here, and all our guests. We have a number of events coming up with Richard Walden, Director and PEO of the Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office, on October 24th. And then we also have another space breakfast on October 9th on the subject of launch ranges with Brigadier General Schless as commander of the 45th Space Wing. Also on October 8th, we have a triad event here at the Capitol Hill Club, in which we have just added General Richard Clark, the head of A-10, as one of our speakers. I want to thank you all for being here, and to do the honors to introduce our guest is the President of the Air Force Association, General Orville Wright.
Thanks, Peter.
Well, what a great morning. Thanks so much to everyone for being here. Our industry partners, AFA's in the middle of strengthening the warfighter and industry partnership in every way. We just came out of a great conference. And I know all of you are AFA members, so I want to remind you the new magazine's out. And in the middle of that magazine is a picture of, not just a picture, but a great story about our new U.S. Space Command leader, Jay Raymond. If you go to the afa.org website, there's a new initiative on behalf of your very humble president who gets a lot of help writing, but there's a couple of president's perspectives in there. One is on next-gen air dominance. The most important one is probably for us, fighting and winning the war in space. And I talk about General Raymond in that article. And so I'll just read what I wrote with some help. With 26,000 experienced space-smart airmen, today's U.S. Air Force Space Command is perfectly positioned as the foundational element of a future U.S. Space Force. Through it, America can ensure it has the space talent, expertise, and systems to guarantee America's vital interests in the space domain, now and in the future. Air Force General Jay Raymond will lead those forces, as well as U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Com, the new Joint Warfighting Command that will be responsible for leading military operations in space. General Raymond could not be better prepared for this critical role. From command experience defending the U.S. and allies against potential threats from North Korean missiles, to operational command of space missions at the squadron, wing, and component levels, his background provides the ideal mix of experience to answer the President's call for a new national commitment to military space. And as the leader of both commands, he will be uniquely positioned to envision both future requirements of U.S. Spacecom and to shape the force that will provide its warfighters in combat capability. So with that, please welcome with me General Jay Raymond.
Good morning. Back with. I tell you, it's great to be here. Orville, thank you for your leadership of AFA. Thank you for hosting these events. They're really, really important to us, and we very much appreciate the forum. Appreciate everybody being here today. As I reflect on this forum, I speak here. I think this might be my 5th or 6th time speaking at this event. They're always great. I haven't been here since May of 18, and I thought what I would do, so that's about 16 months. And I thought what I would do is just give you a sense of what we've been doing for the last 16 months. And I'll tell you that 16 months is probably, you could debate this, but I think I'd win. Probably the most consequential 16 months in the history of national security space. And it's a really, really exciting time to be in this business. If you're wearing a space badge today in our United States Air Force or in the Army or Navy, you have an extra bounce in your step. And it's because this is not just an exciting time; it's a really critical time in our history, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be able to play a small part in this. I would also like to thank Admiral Haney. Admiral Haney was my boss at U.S. Strategic Command. There's several of us in here that had the privilege of serving with Admiral. Sir, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. A lot of what we are doing today was really built and really off of what Admiral Haney did back a few years ago. So, sir, it's good to see you again, and thanks for being here. I would suggest that the last 16 months has really been about a pivot, and making a significant pivot from space as a benign domain to space as a warfighting domain, just like air, land, and sea. And we say that today. We say space is a warfighting domain, just like air, land, and sea. I say it every speech I get, along with, I went to Clemson. I figure out a way to figure that in there. But I always talk about space as a warfighting domain. A handful of years ago, you couldn't say that. Today, it rolls off our lips really easy. But the implications of that are really, really, really significant. The reason why they're significant, our national defense strategy requires this pivot. That's why we're doing this. This isn't space for space sake. This is space to meet the demands of the new strategic environment and the demands that the national defense strategy places on us. So let me just do a recap of just a few of the things that have occurred since the last time I was here speaking. I'm breaking them up into some categories. One, on the organizing for a warfighting domain. So in June of 18, the President announced his intent to establish a Space Force as a separate branch of the Armed Services. Later on, the Department put together a report and submitted that report to Congress outlining the proposal for that service, along with the U.S. Space Command and something called the Space Development Agency. The Air Force stood up a planning team. And that planning team, led by Major General Crozier, is still in place today and still working hard to plan this, Space Force. The last year's National Defense Authorization Act said that the commercial SATCOM responsibilities were going to shift from DISA to Air Force Space Command. That happened on 1 December 2018. General D.T. Thompson had a huge leadership role in making that transfer happen. It also asked us to stand up a Space RCO. We did that as well. That's up and running. We hired a new director. He was in the seat on 1 February. We've already validated 5 programs, and they're off working. And I couldn't be more thrilled with how that's coming. Big SMC went through a pretty significant reorganization as well, and it's still in process. And that's called SMC 2.0. That's to deliver resilient, war-winning space capabilities faster by taking an enterprise approach. From a business major from Clemson, the way I look at SMC 2.0 is if you go on PowerPoint, you have portrait mode and you have landscape mode. We've shifted from portrait mode to landscape mode. That's all you need to know about SMC 2.0, and it's working really, really good. In October of 18, we also hired a chief data officer. And we were the first major command to do so. A lot of the challenges that we face in space are big data types of challenges. And so we went out and we were able to steal a chief data officer from the Department of Justice. And then in a probably one of the biggest wins I've had in the last 3 years, I was able to convince General Goldfein to give up his IMA. And we got General Kreider to come work for me as my MA. I will tell you, Kim has an incredible data breadth of experience. We married Kim up with our chief data officer. We've developed a data strategy that's already beginning to pay dividends. We've developed use cases to be able to demonstrate the goodness of this. We're going to demonstrate this again here in front of Corona, but I'll tell you, the work that Kim is helping us lead, I think, is the best in the Air Force. And so thank you, Kim, for what you do. That same time, roughly, in this time period, we also transitioned cyber out of Air Force Space Command, and we moved that to Air Combat Command. When we were thinking about doing that, to be honest, I had just gotten in the job when we really started talking about that, and I didn't know if that was the right answer. I will tell you today it was absolutely the right answer. It brought cyber operators and cyber intel together under one command, and it allowed us to have singular focus on the space domain and to focus our efforts on defensive cyber ops for space, which is really, really important. We also worked hard to develop partnerships. And it is clear that we are stronger together. In 18, since that last time I was here, we've transitioned the Joint Space Operations Center to a Combined Space Operations Center. That is significant. That one event has sparked an incredible growth in our ability to do combined operations with our allied partners. And I appreciate our partners that are here this morning. We have an order that we operate under called Operation Olympic Defender. This past year, we made that order Five Eyes releasable. And now our partners can operate off of that order with us. And the UK has publicly stated a couple months ago that they have signed up to being that part of our partner. And this will tie into something that I'll talk about here in a minute. We've entered into hosted payload agreements. We entered into a hosted payload agreement with Norway. And that is going well. That's allowing us to get capability on orbit faster at a reduced cost. We've entered into a hosted payload agreement with Japan. We're going to put a space situational awareness sensor on a Japanese QZSS satellite. We expect to sign the memorandum of understanding on that later this year. We had hosted the first ever Air Chiefs Conference where 12 air chiefs from around the world came together in Colorado Springs and met with our Chief Goldfein, to talk about partnerships in space. I thought it was hugely valuable, and in fact, it was so valuable we're going to do it again this coming year. Just a month or so ago, we held our first ever coalition red flag exercise. Space flag exercise. It's modeled after the Air Force red flag exercise, and we brought our coalition partners into it, first time ever. We also opened up more education opportunities, professional development opportunities for our coalition partners. And we've had a stat here, 277% increase in coalition partners attending these development courses. We opened up Space 200 and Space 300, and we just graduated our first 300 class. Again, we are clearly stronger together. It is a growth area for us, and I thank our partners very much. We also have been working hard to develop space warfighters. Now, that's a two-part challenge. That's developing space operators that have a better understanding of joint warfighting, and it's developing what you and I might consider more traditional joint warfighters that have a better understanding of space. We transitioned our Advanced Space Operations School into the 319th Combat Training Squadron to give it a little bit sharper focus on what they train. We've held, since the last time I was here, 2 Schriever War Games that have been hugely valuable. In fact, we just finished one a few weeks ago, and we have expanded international play in that game as well by inviting Japan to participate. We have completely transformed the way we train our operators. From the very beginning. When they go to undergraduate space training out at Vandenberg, we have taken that course and completely revamped it, providing increased scope, increased depth, and a warfighting context to that training. We did a tabletop exercise at the White House hosted by the Vice President. It's a space war game, and we're getting ready to do a second one here this fall. Half of our operators in space, half of our space operators are enlisted airmen. And we have something called weapons school. And our desire is to get our enlisted operators into weapons school. We've taken the first step towards that, and we've stood up a space warfighter, what we call an advanced instructor course. We already had our first beta class, and the second class is been selected. We stood up what we call the Schriever Scholars. It is a professional development opportunity for majors. And so we built the curriculum, we hired the instructors, and then we embedded it at Air Command and Staff College as the 40th seminar of that, where we do it's the only year-long space-centric IDE program in our nation. It has gone spectacularly. The first year they graduated the first class this past spring. The second class is in session now, and next year my plan is to double that and to have 2 seminars. And so it's really, really going well. At the Air Force Academy, we established a space ops major. So there was an astro engineering major. We've now also stood up a space operations major. We are seeing, just this past year, we almost tripled the number of Air Force Academy cadets that came into space from the year previously. And so there's great opportunity there as well. I'll tell you, there's a lot of people knocking on our door wanting to come to work for us. And that's a great challenge to have. We also are resourcing this transformation. Since May of 18, we've delivered 2 POMs. And those POMs are both, with the strong support of Congress and the strong support of the President, have showed increased funding for space and has reflected a pivot from benign domain operations to warfighting domain operations. And now what I'd really like to focus on is U.S. Space Command. While all that's going on, we also built and established the 11th Warfighting Combatant Command. So last August, I got word that, hey, there's a possibility that we're going to stand up this command. Excuse me. And I took a very small, let me grab my water, hold on. Thank you. I brought a team of about 4 or 5 planners with me, TDY, and we locked ourselves in a room for a week. And we came out at the end of the week with what we thought was a good mission analysis for the command. And got home, and then we stood up. I'm sorry. we stood up a task force, and for a year, that task force. Excuse me, I gotta get this frog out of my throat. All right, that's better. And for a year, we had a planning team that planned this command, every detail of this command. And on 29 August of this year, we had a ceremony at the White House, at the White House Rose Garden, which is a pretty cool place to have a ceremony. We established U.S. Space Command as the 11th Combatant Command. A couple weeks later, we went out to Peterson, and we did another ceremony. And that's to recognize that establishment that happened in Washington and do so in front of the members of the command. And in his speech at that ceremony, the Chairman Dunford, said that this, let me get the quote here, was a Sputnik moment. What the President said at the Rose Garden, he said, this is a landmark moment. And he said, no, this is a landmark day. And it was followed up by the Chairman a week or so later saying this is a Sputnik moment. Everybody understands the criticality of this. Everybody understands why this is so important to our nation. So some of you might say, hey, we had a command before. We had a U.S. Space Command. We had a U.S. Space Command in 1985 to 2002. Well, as I said in my speech at the establishment ceremony, we're building on that legacy, but this is a different command built for a different time and built for a different strategic environment. And what I'd like to do is highlight a few significant shifts in this command from the previous command. First of all, if you look at this command, you'll notice in the UCP, the Unified Command Plan, that where the President assigns missions to the command, that this command is a geographic combatant command. The last combatant command was a functional combatant command. This combatant command has an AOR. This combatant command has an AOR that's 100 kilometers above mean sea level globally and higher. We did that to solidify space as a warfighting domain and allow us to have a clear, tighter partnership with the other geographic combatant commands and other combatant commands that we have to operate with. We have a much tighter connection with our partners. We stood up, when we stood up this command, there's 2 operational components in the command. One of those operational components is the Combined Force Space Component Command. C means combined. That's significant. Previously, I was the commander of the Joint Force Space Component Command. Well, now, based on the Five Eyes order being releasable, we now and partners that have signed up to it, we now have a combined command that's going to provide great advantage for our nation and for our partners. There's a much sharper focus on protect and defend. So the other operational component of this command is a Joint Task Force for Space Defense. We've never had that before. We've never had an operational level command solely focused on protecting and defending that domain. It's also going to be hugely important. We've got a tighter link to our joint warfighting partners. We're going to stand up integrated planning elements of space professionals that will be embedded in all the combatant commands that we partner with, and that's every one of them. We've prioritized, we're going to build the first IPEs at United States Strategic Command that's already up and running. We've got a small team built for Indo-PACOM and for EUCOM. That will continue to grow, and then we will also build teams into the other combatant commands to allow us to do that integrated planning that is so necessary to meet the demands of the National Defense Strategy. We also have a tighter partnership with the intelligence community. If you look at the mission statement of the command, we're to protect U.S. and as directed partner satellites. And so a couple months ago, we came to agreement with the intelligence community that today we operate on what we call a unity of effort basis in the National Defense Strategy in the National Space Defense Center that Admiral Haney established. We sit in the same room, we share information, but it's a unity of effort. What we have decided in times of conflict where decisions would have to be quicker, that there has to be somebody that can give direction. And if you look at the UCP mission, that somebody is the United States Space Command Commander. So we've come to an agreement that in heightened states of readiness, there will be, based on a playbook that we'll develop together, that the intelligence community will take direction from the United States Space Command Commander to protect and defend our nation's critical capabilities. Doesn't mean that the NRO isn't, that I'm in their chain of command. I don't do tasking. They don't work for me, but in protect and defend in higher states of conflict, we'll work together and they'll take direction so we can make sure that we can protect and defend the capabilities that we rely so importantly on, not just for our joint force, but for our nation. If you look at the mission sets that's been assigned by the President, I'd break them up into 4 areas, and we call them the 4 Ds. First one is deterrence. Although space is a warfighting domain just like air, land, and sea, we don't want to get into this fight. Our focus is to deter that. And so that's mission set number 1. Second is we're going to defend our capabilities. And that's the second D. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to continue to deliver warfighting capabilities around the globe like we have done for decades. Really beginning back with Desert Storm, which is really the first conflict where we took strategic capabilities and integrated them into a theater of operations. And then finally, we're going to develop space warfighters. And again, as I talked about, that's that 2-part problem. That's developing space experts that understand joint warfighting and developing joint warfighters that have a better understanding of space. So as exciting as this past 16 months has been, hold on tight, because it's going to get even more exciting, because we are very hopeful that we're going to get here with an NDAA, that we'll get a 6th branch of the armed forces focused on space, and that would be a space force. And when you do that, if you look at the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, where there's 2 functions, there's an organized training and equip function, and there's a warfighting function. In both of those functions, we're looking to elevate space to the next level. We've done that with U.S. Space Command on the warfighting side. We went from a component command to a warfighting command, combatant command. Now we're looking to take space, largely done by Air Force Space Command as a major command of the United States Air Force, and elevate that to a 6th branch of the Armed Forces. It's a national imperative that we do this. U.S. Space Command will only be as good as the capabilities that the Space Force will provide it. I couldn't be more excited for that future. I view these as complementary between the warfighting function and the organized training and equip function. And looking forward, in my Air Force Space Command hat today, what I'd like to do, I talked about what we've done over the last 16 months. What I'd like to do is give you just a few things that we're thinking about now. First of all, I talked a little bit up front about this data strategy that we're developing. I really believe that's going to pay huge dividends for us. As we look at enterprise space battle management, command and control, the ability to command and control our forces in a time of conflict. And if you look at what we're doing with space situational awareness, shifting from operating on a catalog focus, I say warfighting focus for space situational awareness, the underlying foundation of that is big data. And so I couldn't be more excited with what we're doing in that area, and I think it's going to pay huge dividends. I mentioned enterprise space battle management, command and control. Colonel Purdy's here. He's helping us lead this effort, and I am really excited that we are on the verge of delivering a C2 capability that's going to pay huge dividends for us. On the pivot SSA from benign domain to warfighting, General Thompson really has been the point man for that effort. We're making some good progress there as well. Today, in the domain that we find ourselves, we do not have the luxury of just being satisfied with knowing where an object is. You have to know more than that, and that's what we're trying to get after with pivoting that SSA. The other big thing that I'd like to highlight is the work that we're doing in the launch ranges. Our launch ranges are national treasures, both at Vandenberg and Cape Canaveral, but we're going to transform them. As launch goes more towards autonomous launch operations, we think to get after the warfighting capabilities we need to make those have greater capacity and more agility. And we have a program in place called Range of the Future where we're working that, and I'm very excited about the possibilities of that going forward as well. I could go on for hours about all the things that we have on our plate, and that's why this Space Force is so important. They'll be able to take these and run with it and deliver these capabilities that the U.S. Space Command is going to require to be able to deter, to defend, to deliver, and to develop joint warfighters. Thanks for letting me be here, and I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, sir, for the Q&A for about the next 15 minutes or so. Please identify yourself. You've heard this before. It's a question, not a speech. And so I'll start off here with a short
With
question.
a speech.
Yeah, short speech. That's right. Short speech. So for General Raymond, we see that one of your key missions is deterrence. What are your biggest challenges in accomplishing that mission? And you have a terrific background across combat air forces and 5th Air Force, as well as all your space operations. So, for example, to deter, how do you hold at risk ground-based enemy ASAT capability, kinetic or non-kinetic, in your integration with, for example, combat air forces? And there's probably an MDC-2 piece of this, so please.
Thanks for the nice softball one right off. First thing in the morning. First of all, I don't think there's such a thing as space deterrence. I think it's just deterrence, and space has a piece of that and can amplify a deterrence message. When you're doing deterrence, you're talking about changing the calculus of a potential adversary. We have a part in that. One of our challenges, you asked about one of the challenges. One of our challenges is, and we're currently looking at, does our security classification posture impact our ability to deter? If you're going to deter, you have to be able to talk about things. And so we're going through the strategy build right now to figure out what that posture should be to make sure that we can adequately deter. The other thing that we have learned is we're not going to do this in a vacuum. And I think the integrated planning elements that will be embedded in the other combatant commands with us will help us develop those deterrence options together with our partners. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Right here.
Good morning, sir. Kurt Ackmeyer.
Yeah.
Sir, one of your 4Ds is delivering.
I'm sorry, sir, where are you from?
Northrop Grumman.
Okay.
Delivering warfighter capability.
Right.
When you look at what the current combatant commands do in terms of their CDDs, their requirements, by the time it's gone through the process and we in industry see it as an RFP, you can't correlate those two. And so you and General Hyten have wanted things cheaper, faster, and better,
Right.
and we do too. But is there a way with the new command where you can sort of circle that and go from the CDD and then review the RFP before it goes to industry to make sure it's going to be cheaper, faster, and what you need?
Yeah, I clearly, as a U.S. Space Command commander, like all other combatant commands, I will have a much stronger and sharper voice in the joint requirements process. I have, in my time as the Air Force Space Command commander and as the component commander for space to U.S. Strategic Command, I've tried to be as transparent as I can be in laying out what our concept of operations are. One of my friends told me one of my retired friends told me that you don't understand how much time and energy industry spends trying to think about what's in your head. And I said, well, that won't take them very much time or energy to figure out what's in this guy's head, but I'll tell you. And so I said, well, let's give out the ConOps. And we brought industry in to give out the ConOps, and because the ConOps was classified at such a level, only about 3 or 4 people could come. And so we work changes on that too. But I will have a much sharper voice in that, and I will make sure that I tackle that what you said. I think there's an opportunity.
Okay, over on this side of the room. Yes, sir.
My name is Sang-min. I'm a reporter from the Radio Free Asia. I have a question about the role of a U.S. command related to deterrence the North Korean threat. The General Dunford mentioned when establishment there is a threat in front of the North Korea. So can you tell me how important U.S. command is when it comes to dealing with North Korean missile threat?
U.S. Space Command will be part of a much broader deterrence operation from our whole of the nation, if you will. And so we will have a very important part working with, in this case, our Indo-PACOM command partners and others to make sure that to make sure that we deter those operations.
Okay. Next question. Yes, ma'am, right here. Can you speak up a little bit? We'll try to get a microphone to you. Sorry.
Thank you, General. I appreciate your presentation today on Teresa Hitchens' Breaking Defense.
Yes.
And I have one clarifying question and then a real question. The clarifying question is how do you differentiate between enterprise battle management C2 and multi-domain C2? How do they fit? Are they the same thing or are they different? And the second question, this microphone is really dull. And the second question.
Is this the real question?
Yeah, this
is
is
the real question.
The real question is, are you planning Plan B in case Space Force is not approved as a new Title 10-6 plan?
Yeah. So enterprise space battle management is going to be a really critical part of multi-domain C2. We've built enterprise space battle management towards that end. We're using open standards, open architected systems to be able to link sensor to shooter in multiple domains, and coupled with the work that we're doing with our unified data library, it's all headed towards that direction. So it's all very closely related. On the planning, we're planning for a Space Force. We need a Space Force. Our nation needs a Space Force, and I'm very hopeful that here in the coming months, Congress will pass the NDA that will allow that to happen.
Back here, please.
Good to see you.
As you know, U.S. Strategic Command offers deterrence and offers offensive capabilities to the President for his option.
Right.
Do you see Space Command similarly linking that capability and providing, as capabilities come online, offensive capabilities to the President as well as options?
Yeah, I think, first of all, every combatant command has a deterrence mission. So it's U.S. Strategic Command has a strategic deterrence mission. All combatant commands have a deterrence mission. How they all come together really is the strength of our deterrence posture. Just as any other combatant command responsible for operations in the warfighting domain, you're going to have a range of capabilities to present options to the President. That's why this command is so important.
Okay, over here. Yes, sir. Back and back.
Yeah, Tony, how are you?
What is your understanding of China's counter space strategy? How well positioned at this point are U.S. forces to incorporate deterrence in their work in terms of training, requirements, and exercise?
Yeah, we have a good understanding of their strategy. We understand their capabilities. We think they have an operational ASAT, kinetic ASAT capability. We're pretty comfortable that they are developing directed energy weapons and fielding, probably fielding lasers to blind our satellites. They also are developing pretty robust on-orbit capabilities that are very complex that could also have a dual-use purpose. So there's a full spectrum of threats out there. It's clear that China would plan to use those threats against us in conflict. I am very comfortable that today that we can protect and defend, and if deterrence were to fail, we're the best in the world, we'd win. The importance of standing up this command and the importance of standing up Space Force is to make sure that we can stay ahead of those threats, and that I can say that same thing 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and we will.
Follow DIA in its public report earlier this year said that China likely next year would field a laser that
Right.
satellites. Is that still a realistic timeline?
Yeah, I look at all the threats as major threats. My big concern is the scope, scale, and complexity of that full spectrum.
Let's go, I think over here we have some congressional staff members. Hold your hand up if you're work on a professional staff. Got anybody here? Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
Please. No questions?
Here
to listen. Back in the back then, please.
Yes, sir. Tim Cox, Tiger Innovations. You mentioned challenges of classification.
Yeah.
Space is among the most compartmentalized of classified work areas. A super challenge for industry and particularly small business when we're trying to help you innovate and move faster, quicker, is being able to get access to the information and the knowledge. Do you see changes in that
I do.
as we move into a warfighting domain?
I do. We've already made, there's already been some change, and I expect more to follow. And it's to do that, but it's also to get after the deterrence piece. And so I think you'll see, we're working this hard, and I'm hopeful that you're going to see some changes.
Okay, over here. Yes, ma'am, back and back. And please speak up. I can make myself heard, so I'd ask you to make yourself heard too. I can't get around the microphone, so please.
Caitlin Johnson from CSIS.
Yes.
I was wondering if the Senate has their way, you will not only be in charge of Space Command, but also have command of Space Force. Those are two really big jobs. Are you planning for that possibility?
I'm planning U.S. Space Command right now, and I'm got my head down, and I'm really proud of where we've come since last August. If you were to look at the amount of work it took to get from concept, the little planning team in August of last year, to being in the Rose Garden with the President, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense on U.S. Space Command, it's pretty incredible, the amount of work that went in to do that. And I would tell you, on day one, we were up and running. And as I said in my speech at the establishment ceremony, we were the best in the world at space, but on the 29th of August, we were a little bit better. And that's because we now have a command that's singularly focused, a warfighting command singularly focused on this. Nothing against U.S. Strategic Command. I've served in U.S. Strategic Command on the staff. I've been an operational component. I've been a service component. They were spectacular. But the breadth of that command didn't afford them the opportunity for singular focus. And U.S. Space Command has that opportunity, and I'm really excited where this command is going to lead us.
Terrific. You got some Mitchell Institute fellows back there. Chip, I bet you got a good question.
Make it easy.
Air Force Major.
You got to speak up, Chip.
Doing a fellowship at the Mitchell Institute. We've heard a lot about the pivot to the Pacific, and now we have the pivot to space. Are those mutually exclusive, or are they one and the same, or does one take more precedence right now?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. I think the pivot to space is a global. I mean, it's a global reality. It's foundational to it's foundational to what the joint forces are going to do in any part of the world, and it's foundational to things from humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, all the way up to high-end conflict. Space, as you know, fuels our American way of war. And we've got to make sure that American way of war is secured. And that's what this command's focused on.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Joe Dodd with Olympus Corporation.
Yeah.
In broad terms, the average American has some understanding of what we do air, sea, land, what the threats are, the systems are very supportive of Air Force, Navy,
Right.
it comes to space, there's a lot of misunderstanding, there's a lot of caricature. What is Space Command? What can industry individually, as companies and associations do to help shape that narrative in the right direction?
Yeah, there's a long time saying in the space business that satellites don't have a mother, right? It's hard to have a connection with something that's orbiting 22,300 nautical miles up. But there is a connection. And just as we answered that question, that space fuels American way of war, it fuels American way of life. And so, you know, one of the things that I always say is, I don't want to touch any microphones, but, you know, for the folks that have a smartphone, your smartphone is pretty stupid without space. And so I think one of the things we can do is clearly articulate what space capabilities do for our nation. We're doing that every chance we can, and I would encourage others to do that as well. I'll leave it at that.
Way in the back, please speak up.
Yeah, Nathan Stroud, C4IS Arnett. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. A little louder would be good.
Earlier you mentioned hosted payloads, and I was wondering if you could sort of outline your strategy moving forward with hosted payloads and what partnerships you're looking for moving forward and what payloads you're looking forward to moving to a hosted payload.
I would welcome the opportunity to do that with you offline. I don't have that at my fingertips. But what I will tell you is we would like to do more of these. You know, we've taken a couple first steps here with Norway and Japan, and we're hoping to do more. And I can hook you up with the folks that are developing that longer-term strategy.
Okay, we got time for about 2 more questions. There's going to be a short media roundup at the end of this, so I'm not excluding the media. Mike Hamill is our advisor for our Air Force Association and one of the elders. How about a question?
This really isn't a setup. First of all, thank you for what you've done. You have brought this to miles. As an old guy in this business and the rest of that, I could not agree with you more that the progress has been made over the past 18 months in this area is dramatic. So thank you for what you've done and being recognized for this. It seems, though, that one of the really big questions is that it isn't just a recognition of threats around the globe as we now move back into a pure competitive kind of environment. We've also seen a big uptick in terms of what's happening. Space now is becoming a media of commerce and innovation alike. Where do you see and what do you think are the requisite authorities and capabilities you'll need to better be able to leverage what's happening in the commercial sector, as well as then helping to protect as we become more dependent upon that?
Yeah, you're not allowed to call on any senior advisors anymore. One of the things that I think we need to do, I'm proud of what we're doing today. We've made some advances in this, but I would like to be able to capitalize on the commercial industry to a greater extent. And so part of the SMC 2.0 portrait to landscape shift has also been a partnership cell. Can you give me
Chief Partnership Office?
A Chief Partnership Office to be able to get after what do we need to do to do more of that. I think the work that we're doing with our data is also going to help us do that as well. I see great advantage to our country for being able to leverage commercial industry. I say this in forms, and it's a really bad term to use in the space business, but there's an explosion of commercial space stuff happening, and we've got to capitalize on it. It'll help change the business model. It'll help us change our risk calculus. It'll help change our architectures. We have also, during the time that Admiral Haney was the Stratcom commander, we stood up a commercial integration cell at the time it was the Joint Space Operations Center, now the Combined Space Operations Center. We exercise with our commercial partners. We share data with our commercial partners. We play in war games with our commercial partners, and we've learned a lot from those commercial partners. The other thing that I would say is that the authorities that I received, or the responsibilities I received last December when we transitioned the responsibility for procuring commercial SATCOM from DISA to Air Force Space Command, is also going to be very, very valuable in that, especially when you link that up with the missions of a U.S. Space Command as we look to be able to operate in a contested communications environment.
And last question over here, sir, Robbie.
Yeah, Robbie Schauder from Federal Aviation Administration.
Yes.
Next gen. So I'd like to check in and see how you're doing on, as you stand up Space Command and how things are going with the interagency, and if there's anything the interagency can do to facilitate better connectivity, and how can we help as you stand up this new capability, particularly in the area of DMT.
Yeah, one of the things that being at a combatant command level, it affords you the opportunity to operate at the interagency level more effectively. So things that we're doing, for example, like the war game that I mentioned that we played in the White House with the Vice President, there's all the interagency partners that are there as well. So as we do this and learn together, I think there's great opportunities. On the FAA side, primarily where our partnership has been the strongest is on commercial launch. And because FAA has the regulatory authority for that business. And we're working very closely with Brigadier General retired Wayne Monteith, who leads that effort. And we want to continue that partnership as well.
Well, thank you very much, sir. My job to be an unabashed advocate for airmen. We could not be blessed with a better leader, warrior statesman than General J. Raymond. As we support your mission to deter and develop and deliver and defend. So thank you very much.
Thank you.